Good afternoon, or afternoon for us in the Toronto area anyway. Morning for some of you who are elsewhere in the country. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for VDC What's Next. I'm your host, Adam Friel. I'm the editor of Onsite Magazine, and I'd like to welcome you to this 60-minute seminar sponsored by GC Pay and Software One. Now, before I introduce our speakers this afternoon, I'd like to take a moment to go over some housekeeping items. First, the webinar is being recorded, so if for any reason you have to leave early or miss part of the presentation, a link to the recording will be emailed to all registrants in 24 hours, and closed captioning is available on the recording. Secondly, questions can be asked in two ways. There's the raise hand tool or the Q&A function. If you raise your hand, I'll allow you to speak once the panel members finish their comment, and then we'll carry on from there. But I'm more preferable to the Q&A if we can, because that will allow the questions to be handled at the end of the session. And questions submitted can be asked anonymously through the Q&A, whereas with the raise hand, you will become part of the recording. So just be aware that your voice will be on there if you ask a question directly that way. In the Q&A, if you see any questions that you really like that somebody's asked, vote them up so that they come up to the top. We'll focus on those ones first. And then at the end, there will be a 3-question customer satisfaction survey. It'll pop up after the webinar. It takes a couple minutes to answer, and it's completely anonymous, but it does allow our company to continue to offer you the content that you're after at the right times of day that match for you. So any feedback that you're willing to provide, I appreciate. So with that all done, let's get into introducing the panelists for today. So I'll start with Aaron Akerst. He's the manager of construction services in BC at PCL Construction, and he's got 14 years of hands-on project management experience, leadership skills, and practical construction knowledge that he brings to his role that empowers people in their technological journey. Passionate about improving workflows and outcomes, he believes in improving the construction industry in both productivity and owner outcomes by embracing changes in the project delivery and coordination. In his role at PCL, he consults with project teams, owners, and trade and design partners to create custom practical solutions in building information, emerging technology, scheduling, quality, and formwork design. And I like how he put it when I asked him who he was and what he did. He said the construction industry is changing, and I work daily to implement that change at PCL. So welcome, Aaron. Next on our list is Stephen Bianchi. He's a BIM manager at Hatch, and he's been involved in the BIM and VDC construction sector for over 9 years, specializing in linear infrastructure. He's led the BIM and VDC implementation and execution for many large-scale construction projects across Ontario, and is continually striving to enhance the civil construction industry's standard of digital collaboration through the use of BIM and VDC tools for design and construction coordination, planning, and information management. So Stephen, welcome. Hamad Chowdhury is the National Director of Digital Project Delivery Services, Digital and Data Engineering at Ellis Don. He's studied urban studies and architectural technologies and worked for an architectural firm before joining Ellis Don in 2014. He's championed various positions, including architectural technologist, project coordinator, proposal coordinator, BIM coordinator, VDC manager, and VDC director. So he's well-versed in all of this. And working with BIM and digital workflows, his focus at Ellis Don is to implement construction technology to offer appropriate and novel solutions to construction problems. So Hamad, welcome. And finally, Steve Rollo is National BIM VDC Manager at Graham Construction. He's got more than 15 years of experience in building information modeling and virtual design and construction, covering all phases from design through construction. Passionate about BIM and VDC, the development of effective workflows, and the application of technology towards project collaboration and success. He is continually developing and growing expertise within the industry and leads the research and development of BIM and VDC and digital construction technologies within Graham. So I think we have a great panel here. Thank you all for joining us today. And I'll start the session off, getting the ball rolling with getting each of you to outline how your companies and yourself are currently using digital technologies in your construction planning and management. So give us a brief overview or picture of how your company has integrated VDC into its projects. Is it a must on every project, most projects, key projects? And let us know also if you use BIM or a different modeling tool that you find most effective. So I'll start with you, Aaron, at PCL.
Hi. Yeah, so I would say, I think maybe the first part of your question, which types of projects are we implementing VDC workflows on? So I would say all of our major projects are leveraging some form of VDC workflows. It's a little bit harder on the special projects, kind of smaller scale item projects, just as the timeline to get up and running, and it is still new, I would say, broad to the broader industry. So we're struggling a little bit on that front, but pretty much all of our projects. And I would say I've taken over this role about 3.5 years ago, and we had one person in this department who would answer BIM question when it came his way. We'd do a little bit of 3D visualization, and what we're really doing, and it's a journey for sure, but taking that kind of point solution idea of VDC and BIM and really trying to move it to the center of the project so that our entire project teams have access to the 3D model and can leverage that 3D model to solve their coordination problems, help mitigate risk, and seize on opportunities that they come across.
Excellent. Thank you, Aaron. How about Hatch? Stephen, how prevalent is VDC in your company's projects?
So Hatch has integrated VDC into its projects by changing the process of how we generate design. So traditionally most projects would be designed in 2D. So from there, if VDC was required on a project, then certain elements would be modeled either by the company receiving the drawings or by the firm creating the drawings. So for some time now, we've been shifting away from the old traditions, and we're pushing to generate our designs in 3D. And we use tools from Autodesk like Revit, Civil 3D, and InfraWorks, and some Bentley tools as well, like Open Roads, Open Buildings, and Open Plant Modeler. So using this approach, we can generate our drawing deliverables quite easily from these models, but it also gives us the ability to perform clash detection and identifying issues early on so we can resolve the problems fast and efficiently. It also generates a very collaborative environment for the team. So it allows a lot of the different disciplines to come together in a coordination model through something we call a federated model. And we use programs for that like Navisworks and BIM 360 model coordination. And we also use programs like BIM Track to track these issues so that we can hold responsibility to them and make sure they're resolved in a timely manner. Recently, we've also been putting a lot of focus on data-rich models. So these models will contain many attributes built into the model, so it'll be a lot more than just a 3D shape. And I do believe VDC is a must for all major projects, as well as most minor projects, but it does depend on the scope and the scale of the job. So that does need to be assessed on a case-by-case basis. So when you look at the byproduct of using VDC, you end up with a great approach to design, coordination, and collaboration, which we've really seen here at Hatch. And as well as a great output for like quantity takeoffs, the ability to visualize and optimize scheduling and staging. So this has really not only helped us as an engineering firm, but it's also enabled the use of VDC for the contractor who is building the project.
Excellent, thank you. And Hamad, what about Alice Dawn?
Yeah, just really quickly, I think a lot of the use cases were hit by Aaron and Stephen there. But looking at VDC and how we're getting into our projects, it's not going to be on every project, just like Aaron mentioned. But on the mega projects, I think it's pretty safe to say every single mega project is definitely going to be leveraging it. Where I think a little bit of the shift is coming is upskilling traditional project coordinators and folks to be able to use those tools without having dedicated VDC folks. And then in terms of like our use of BIM and 3D softwares, we use kind of the traditional Autodesk workflows as well, but looking at different tools. So how does FieldWire for us fit into the picture? How does Revitso fit into the picture? How do some of the more, specific things like Sin2 or some of the reality capture or Struction Site and some of the 360 different platforms kind of play into that as well, or QPix and so on and so forth. So it's really integrating construction technology now into VDC and then bringing that into the business if we can.
Excellent. And then Steve, fill us in on Graham and your company's use of these technologies.
Yeah, so it pretty much touches on everything that everyone's already said. we definitely strive to ensure that where it's applicable and where the scope calls for it and the complexity of a job calls for it, that we fit it with the correct set of digital tools to execute that job. The thing that we're shifting towards a lot now is this overall idea of digital construction as opposed to just BIM or VDC, because it encompasses so much more than just a model. So things like 360 photogrammetry, drone capture, laser scanning, they all tie together, but they're not exclusive to just BIM or VDC as we traditionally know it with that data-rich model or digital twin efforts. So we really, the terms are starting to become so much more broad than maybe they were 5 years ago, as far as what's kind of all in that same package or in that same wheelhouse for everyone. Like Hamad mentioned, we are definitely shifting towards this notion of having project teams that are capable and have individuals on the project that are inside of these tools and leveraging these technologies, as opposed to having a large pool of dedicated BIM and VDC resources. We're equipping the project teams with the capabilities of self-performing those tasks themselves to better fit the job, as they are the ones that are on boots on the ground, seeing it every day, living it every day. And so we're just equipping them with more tools to execute more efficiently.
Excellent. Awesome. It's all great background, and it's funny. Some of the comments alluded to some of the notes that I have here that I'm hoping we're going to be able to cover off during the session. So thank you for the setting us with some baseline there. And speaking of one of the topics, one of the things that I've seen out there is a 5D designation, and that's where our 3D modeling is starting to bring in time and costing, the possibility of actually doing some automated, I guess, pricing and scheduling. So when you make a change, it's going to indicate some of the implications of those changes. Is this something that's currently being used at your company? Is it something that you're exploring? It sounds like there's a lot more of this. We're definitely getting away from just simple clash detection that the old systems of BIM were that was my introduction to it anyway, is making sure that the plumbing didn't run into the electrical, things of that nature. But we've got so much more going on here. So I'm going to pitch this question over to Hamad and just ask for your input. Is this 5D, I guess, next generation of BIM? Is it coming? Is it here? And is it something that's being investigated if it's not here quite yet?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting question. Like, there's a couple of aspects, and I know the gentleman on the call will jump into this as well, but like the 3D, 4D, 5D, 6D, 7D kind of naming convention, I think is a little bit misleading. If we could focus more on the use case aspect of using the model and integrating those processes. So, like adding time so you can visualize construction progress and make decisions based on that. That's how kind of the industry's been calling 4D. With 5D, the cost aspect of it, cost management, we can look at it a lot of different ways. One would be truly getting to that planned project and resource kind of draw as the project progresses. So as we're 6 months, a year into a project, where were we supposed to be with cash flow and progress, and being able to compare that to your actual costs, and then getting a comparison there, if you will. And in that sense, I think as the industry overall, like, that is not at that kind of picturesque 5D standard, right? Like, that is kind of coming into different bits and pieces where organizations will look at different tools, technologies, and workflows to get that. So we have had clients and projects, as Elliston, where we've done that cash flow analysis with the model and track that. But again, that's not commonplace in my opinion. What we have seen is more construction technology come in. So we're using a platform, for example, called BuildDots on the commercial side and AI clearing on the civil side, that use kind of AI to give you information based on your model, your drone data or your 360 photo data, your schedule data, to give you those insights on your actual progress. And now we've been able to look at that and how can we tie that to the actual cost module to give you an actual 5D, if you want to call it that, right? In terms of that. So the naming convention, I don't agree with, but the idea behind it, I think there are bits and pieces that are getting into the industry. Maybe not at that Hollywood level style, but definitely in terms of, hey, how do we get that in that process?
Excellent. And how about our other panelists? Does anybody have similar experience? Like Steve, is there anything from Graham that would echo some of what Hamad's seen?
Well, first of all, I totally agree with him on the naming convention. I think it is misleading, and a lot of times with some of these naming conventions that happen in this realm, it's almost everyone anticipates it being an all or nothing. Whereas as Hamad alluded to, there's pieces that can be attacked, or there's small chunks that can be attacked. But when it comes to the more specific of the costing aspect itself, I still think while the anticipation or the drive is there within the industry to want to leverage it for specific model-based quantity takeoffs and everything like that, we still have to understand that there is a disconnect in the industry from a garbage in, garbage out perspective as far as what data we receive inside the model to effectively extract that data. And if those parameters aren't specified at the right time, or if we as the GCs are not at the table at the right time to articulate what we would want to extract, that makes it very difficult to effectively and efficiently do those takeoffs properly. So the drive is there for it. I think it's still in its infancy as far as finding out the best way, most efficient way of executing it.
Maybe
Awesome.
add to that a little bit. I think our contracts are all written for 2D, and so from a risk management perspective, when we're doing those takeoffs, it's really hard for us to say trust the model. And so we will use the model for back check of quantities, that type of thing. And if we're in any kind of design progression, whether that's in a CM role or a design build role, we'll definitely trend some of those quantities over time and use that the kind of automation that comes out of leveraging that information from the model to trend it and make sure that we're trending in the right direction. But in terms of fully relying on quantities out of the model, certainly on the estimate side is challenging, I would say, at this stage in the BIM evolution.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that I was going to ask about is exactly that, is the how accurate can you get an estimate out of something like this, especially over the past year we've seen materials fluctuate wildly on pricing, and it's hard enough in a standard workflow to ensure what the price, say, of lumber is going to be 2 weeks from now. So I was curious to know just how accurate some of these systems are providing.
So I think it really depends. It depends on the scope. I say, generally speaking, structure is going to be the closest, but it does depend on how the modeling standards are set up. Do I have columns running through slabs? Then I'm double counting that little bit of concrete going through. Those types of things are definitely pieces that inhibit the adoption. But things like counting, if I want to count the number of sinks in a hospital, that's something that can very easily be done out of the model. So depends on what exactly the scope you're looking at. So.
Yeah, and I was just gonna add to that there. Yeah, there's a lot of things definitely that need to be taken into consideration, and I think everybody made very good points about in the last question you asked about trusting the model and having the right attributes in the model. And I think that's something that over the last year been really focusing on the engineering side, is to try to ensure that these models are set up with trustworthy quantities, the right attributes, the classifications, so that it could feed into these types of systems and provides a little bit more of automation and trust. I also think with the 4D and 5D systems, there's a lot that needs to be done between the scheduling and the modeling that really needs to reflect what's happening on site. And I think that gets overlooked at the time of pursuit or during getting the job. So really, it's so important that like a modeler or a designer will work with both the construction team and the scheduler to generate that accuracy, to really reflect what's happening on site is reflected in the model. And it does take a lot of prep and a lot of work. And I think that's why it kind of falls behind, or it seems like it's really hard to maintain or execute.
I think that's making sure that similar work breakdown structure in your schedule and your model is critical. If you're starting from two different places, you're just going to be square peg round hole for the entire project. And so you got to know that that's where you want to go when you start your schedule and your model, so that you can combine those two pieces together efficiently.
Now, are these systems also incorporating data from suppliers and things like that? Like, how easy is it to integrate information from kind of the next level of participant in the food chain, if you will, on a site? And I'll throw that out to either Aaron or Stephen. I see Aaron smiling. What?
I mean, I think it is just about communication, getting those costings. Like, you have your costs per unit usually for most items and materials, right? So it's just about maintaining those costs. And obviously it's easier said than done, but I think needs to be constant back and forth to make sure those pricings are updated, because throughout your quantity takeoffs, you'll have your numbers. Now it's just a matter of putting a cost to that number and ensuring that costing is up to date and accurate.
Yeah, I would say from on the estimate side of things, I think that's maybe more advanced than we are as an industry right now in terms of getting that costing information into the model at the estimate time. Like, we're just not there at this stage. Certainly from third parties, where we are starting to see supplier at least sub-trade involvement pulling supplier information into the model is more as part of a digital handover piece and building that digital twin for the owners, and really starting to set up structures to capture that data as efficiently as possible. So it's data often that we're capturing through the commissioning process. How do we tie that back to the model, or use the model to capture that commissioning information, so that we can hand over some data, some really valuable project specific data to the owner at the end, as more, I would say, the cusp of where the industry is in terms of capturing that supplier data.
Excellent, thank you. Now, to go a little bit different direction, let's look at the input of information from sites. How widespread is the use of IoT sensors? So to track materials, personnel, progress on your sites. The Internet of Things, we're seeing it everywhere. It's been the catchphrase for a few years, but I know there are sensors that will help with data capture on a site and being used for different things. So I'm curious as to some of the key benefits of using these tools, either now or that you're seeing in the not too distant future. And because one of the first news items that I got to write about included Spot the robotic dog, I'm going to pitch this over to Aaron.
So really hitting a nail on the head there for PCL with our Job Site Insights platform, or JSI. So we've it's about 5 years we've been developing this platform to be a sensor agnostic platform. So we're bringing in a single gateway that can connect to multiple different sensors. We're deploying sensors on all ranges of projects, from our largest projects all the way down to our smallest special project, depending on the use case. I think the really base use case that we kind of started with was temperature and humidity. So monitoring that, whether that's through generally in a temporary heating environment, making sure that we're keeping the right atmospheric conditions for finishes going in. But that's now expanded into concrete sensors to monitor concrete temperature, and we can forecast, or we can get actual data saying that the concrete's up to strength, ready for stripping, that type of information. Water sensors to sense that there's a leak somewhere, and they're connected to an actual valve through that's actually shutting things off, and then superintendent's getting a notification, hey, we've shut off the water system, those types of things. So I would say first part of your question, it's here. We're absolutely leveraging it. What we're seeing is, projects are a little bit hesitant sometimes to get into it. Once they have a single gateway on their site and they've got that one sensor, it's like, oh, but I also want to measure this thing and also want to measure that thing. And we're starting to be able to plug and play a bunch of other sensors into those projects.
Excellent. And to the whole panel, if you're using tag sensors or anything like that to track some personnel rather than just the job site, job itself, are we also looking at ways to ensure that you know who's on your sites and possibly where they are on your sites? Is there some benefit there knowing that this technology is there that can be used from a safety perspective?
I'll maybe jump in on this one really quick here. So in a broader sense, yes, there's absolutely a huge benefit of that technology. What we're seeing is that we're not necessarily tracking where they are on site specifically. I mean, in some cases that they would be, but the one benefit that we really see from knowing how many people, especially are on site, is it complies with our HSE guidelines internally as far as how many safety personnel we need to have on site, how many nurses, how many, all that type of information. So by tracking that, we can better forecast and predict when we need to equip the site with those individuals. Also, the other side that we look at using it for is to validate and verify our trades billing back to us, as far as how much time they've spent on site, how many crew members they've had, so on and so forth. It's a back check system for us to validate that.
And I think a good point to add here too, because Steve and Aaron kind of covered a couple of pieces of the IoT side and kind of the applications. There's also kind of the other traditional back end to create the smart buildings, right? So a lot of that uses the same kind of technologies and infrastructure and communication networks. So part of that is taking the legacy systems and really unifying them, creating a smart building for our clients and being able to do that. But then flipping that back onto the construction site for operations. There's other innovations out there. So one example of a pilot we're running is this organization called versatile.ai, and they've created this IoT device that you put onto your crane hook. And if you think about a crane, it's on most major projects and kind of like a control tower, if you will, at an airport. You can see kind of the truck deliveries coming in, the materials, all that kind of stuff. And utilizing that with some sort of artificial intelligence to give you a complete IoT computer vision and AI kind of program that can now tell you insights on the progress on your project, right? How much, for example, concrete in cubic meters are we putting in from buckets that we're picking up? What is our crane utilization and efficiency? And then going to kind of Steve's point about the subcontractors as well, a lot of times coordinating these kind of things, such as deliveries on your crane, can become issues and points of negotiation or points of dispute because so-and-so wasn't ready when my load was supposed to be picked up or rigged. But now you have kind of these new IoT devices getting to that level of granularity on site too. So I just wanted to mention that.
Awesome. It kind of lends itself a little bit to what I was about to ask you anyway, was how far away are we from having all of this information kind of commonly flow into our digital twins and that and adjust our scheduling and because to me all these sensors they're kind of they're eyes and ears, right? And that's feedback that can go into what I almost envision as the mothership being that model that you're going to all work from. If a sensor is saying that the concrete is cured 3 days earlier than what was anticipated on the plan, are you able to then bring that into your model and adjust scheduling and whatnot? And are we getting there? Where do we stand?
I don't know. Oh, sorry, Aaron, do you want to go? Okay. I don't think we're quite there yet as an industry, but I think the technology is definitely there. Like we can see the concept of it being rolled out in a very controlled environment. 100%. I don't think there's any doubt with anybody on the call here with that. Where we're not yet as an industry is, to kind of get a little bit more 30,000 foot view is shifting the construction and design paradigm of how we procure contracts and administer and deliver that. As soon as we're able to come up with a methodology that becomes focused on the digital kind of methodology so that things that Stephen was saying on the design side, and then both Aaron and Steve had talked about on the construction side, become integrated into the business process of procuring these projects, I think it'll be really hard to see that across the industry. Yeah, so that's just my 2 cents. Aaron, I know you want to jump in there.
Yeah, no, I would echo that. I definitely, more collaborative contracts that address the digital side of things will key pieces to really adopting full digital solutions like you're talking about there, Adam. I wanted to come back to something Stephen was talking about in the opening there about really that data structure and data standards in his model, and I think that's the foundation that we need to be able to build out, whether it's connecting IoT sensors or tracking progress or all of those kinds of things. We need that well built data foundation to be able to connect. Hamad listed off a whole bunch of different softwares that he's looking at, to be able to connect those different softwares into a single platform where we can start to see and visualize and get those data insights. We really need that data structure set out from the beginning from designers like Stephen.
So I think the other thing too that is kind of a common theme that of all the questions that have been asked so far, and likely will continue through other ones, we're talking about straight up communication. And I think where we run the biggest disconnect, Aaron, you mentioned it at the beginning, when it comes to contract language and everything like that, we need to have all parties at the table to understand the full scope of what the project wants to achieve earlier. And it's newer in our ecosystem right now, but the ECI contract format, or early contractor involvement, is definitely one step towards getting more of that engagement, so that not only from the owner's perspective, understanding what they require for operation of the building, going downstream into it being designed and the data injected properly at the design stage over to the contractors to outfit it with the supply trades and everything like that. It has to start at the top, because as soon as you get to a certain point in each of those phases, you run into a stopgap of the opportunity to inject the data that you would need to go further downstream. So that the ECI contract, I'm really curious to see where that takes hold in the next few years, because I think that's definitely a big stepping stone in the right direction for that total idea of this digital twin ecosystem.
I would add maybe one more piece to that, Steve, was that owner, the projects where we're having the best data structure and just general setup are the projects where the owner is requesting something as a deliverable. And it's not just, I want BIM, it's, I want this data structured in this format. And so, that's where all of a sudden our project teams are seeing that as project risk, and they're putting time and effort into that to really manage and make sure that that's being done. But until our owners are really driving that or pulling that data downstream, it becomes, it's the first thing on the budget, in the budget line item that gets cut, because it's just seen as a cost to making people potentially uncompetitive.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Aaron, too. I mean, all your points too. I think what I've seen in the trend was that the owner never wants, well, now we're seeing it more and more, but the owner is not really, they don't really care about BIM or VDC, and it's usually either the contractor driven, and like you said, there's a budget, and that always gets affected, right? So I think, like you said, to your point, is when the owners really start saying, I want this A to Z, and those digital requirements, it really drives the whole boat of, from the top down, we need this and we need this structure, and there's a budget for it, and it's maintained, and we'll really see that full life cycle of the project through those types of requirements.
Excellent. And I guess one of the things that I'm supposed to wait till the Q&A session, but I had a really good question pop up, and it echoes a bit here. But how critical is it? And again, the question came from about the sub trades, but it's also having to do with the owners as well. I think is how critical is it to have buy-in to make this successful, and the motivation for them to utilize this technology. It's sounding like without the support of the owner, for sure, but there's also the other side of it, the sub trades as well. So I'll dive a little bit early onto what was going to be my first of the Q&A session questions, but it did pop up in our Q&A questions. So I'll go across the board there. Stephen or Steve, if you want to hop in on it, go for it.
Sure, yeah. I think while I'll say it's critical that they are on board as well, it definitely doesn't make or break the project in the sense. However, we see almost tenfold greater success when the subtrades are bought into it as well. They're the ones that are constructing on site. And so when we look at the comparison between the design models and the subtrade models, there's large discrepancies. And so to get that input and injection from the subtrades to validate the design or to make some better value engineering decisions, or to optimize a schedule because of the cost of installation or a specific piece of equipment, whatever the case is, it's definitely critical to have that expertise injecting their knowledge into what is actually going to be constructed on site. I always like to say one of the whole purposes of BIM or VDC technology and processes is to stop things from happening before they happen. And so the more input we get from those people actually executing the construction, the better, in my opinion.
Yeah, so I totally agree, Steve. And as well, like the buy-in's so critical because, like, say you have 6 subtrades and only 4 of them are bought into BIM and the other 2, there's no models for them. Well, there's no coordination happening in the model unless the contractor is going to take that design and model it, right? So you need everybody in the whole puzzle to be using BIM in order for you to get like a good quality coordination model. And like Steve said, to prevent these issues before they happen on site.
Totally. I would certainly, I think read somewhere about, BIM alone versus BIM together, and BIM alone, we get some value, whether that's PCL doing something just for ourselves, we get some value out of it. But the more stakeholders that we engage in that process, the more we get out of it and the more the project benefits as a whole. And so I would say I mean, you can get value without all of your stakeholders involved, but the more of them that you get, the exponential value growth you're going to see for all stakeholders.
And then looking at time, I think we've got about 5 minutes left in the in the main session. And then we'll do the Q&A. I promise I won't dip too far over the fence again till we get through the original list. But I'll pose the final question across the board and wrap up the formal session, if you will. So what should a company in the construction sector be doing to be ready for the next steps in the evolution of VDC, and as these 3D models start to evolve more and more, and we're seeing more sensor inputs and things like that. So if you're not quite there yet, but you're looking at this going, you know that you have to get there, what are the steps that company management owners should be looking at? And I'll start with Stephen.
Okay, so I mean, yeah, no problem. So there's a lot of steps. I'm just going to cover 2 things that I think are quite critical, and they stem around pretty much processes and data, right? So up until, I mean, it's been a free for all of the VDC industry. Kind of, there's limited standards or best practices, and we're seeing more and more of them come out. And one thing I want to highlight is the ISO 19650, which does help outline a lot of different things, like best practices for model coordination and collaboration, all the way to suitability codes, which help determine like the use of a model, whether it's for review or work in progress, or for construction or estimation. So kind of familiarizing your company with those standards, and also trying to implement them into your design contracts, and ensuring that the designers are following those types of standards, as well as your construction projects as well. And that'll help give like a little bit of guidance and guidelines on how to execute. And then another big thing, and I touched on it about, was the model data and the model attributes. Really, the big thing next to the importance of an accurate 3D model is the data that comes with that model. It'll really help with the life cycle of using that model. And it just helps employ the model through a lot of like 4D and 5D simulations, as well as quantity takeoffs, like facility maintenance models, and the generation of the digital twin models. So just familiarizing yourself with what is required for these types of outputs, and really, again, putting them in the contract, and ensuring that if you're not getting the models with these attributes, that you internally are attributing the models with these types of standards.
Awesome. And Hamad, can I pick your brain there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think part of it depends on what part of the construction sector you're servicing to get ready for this evolution in VDC. So if you're part of our subcontractor partners and that entire kind of supply chain side, I think it's going to be really dependent on what your size and scope is, right? So some of our mechanical partners, I'd argue, are on the leading edge. And I think Aaron and Steve can kind of concur with that. But some of the smaller kind of players in the more difficult geographies that don't have maybe as big of a pool of clients that are requesting that, they need to start looking at their business process and how these tools can even start to integrate the base level of VDC. If we're looking at some of the more sophisticated kind of folks, some of the larger players on the more construction management and the GC side, I think it's more now about what is the strategy for each of these organizations of unlocking, as even Stephen Bianchi just said here, that model that's available in the model data environment, but also what's available for us as a client experience, right? So just because somebody needs a model to have XYZ because they think it's about operations, it's really, I think, the onus on the GCs now to start to educate our clients about the different complementary construction technology around VDC and the evolution of how kind of these artificial intelligence-based systems can start to come back and inform decisions. And ultimately, this goes right back to the beginning of when you have a project and you want to start thinking about, I have a plot of land, I want to come up with different design scenarios, different kind of methods of schedule execution. That's where we need to be able to bring that VDC kind of service on the front end and integrate, as I think Steve mentioned earlier too, those supply chain partners, the early agreements, but really with technology at the focus point of that. So the evolution of VDC now, as a broad stroke, in my opinion, is not about how do we do 3D coordination or any of that. It's more about the more sophisticated technologies around that are trying to look at automated data capture and informed decision making into that process.
Excellent. And Steve?
So could agree with all the comments made so far. And I think from a standpoint of, if you're, as you mentioned, if you're not already engaged in leveraging these technologies or processes, how do you get started and everything like that? I think one of the biggest things that I would say, coming from not only the GC end, from a large and small, and previous life working for an implementation firm as a reseller, don't anticipate to do everything at once. Take it in small chunks, because it's your standard. If you overpromise and underdeliver, then that's going to reflect badly on you, and also it demoralizes the teams as well. When you don't see the success of what you're anticipating or aspiring to do, that can definitely demoralize and lose confidence in that type of technology innovation strategy. So I was going to say, it ties to that strategy that Hamad was talking about, that define your strategy and take it in steps. Understand that it's going to be a journey and it's going to take some time to gain efficiencies on it. It's like they say, you start your own business, for example, you shouldn't expect to see returns until your 5 or 7 year mark. It's a very similar type of mentality to be successful. Take it in baby steps and make sure you have those champions that are helping drive it as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the being able to celebrate the milestone markers along the way makes that mountain climb a lot. Doesn't seem like it's a giant mountain when it's in chunks, right? And then Aaron, how about yourself?
So I would probably echo a lot of what Steve was alluding to there. I mean, maybe the first thing I would say is just start. I think it's really easy, especially for experienced people who are used to building off of 2D, and truthfully, coming from a project manager background into this role, BIM was something that I was like, I don't know about this 3D thing. I can look at 2D plans. I get the gist looking at 2D plans. And so it's been a mind shift for me to kind of accept that. But I still see senior people on some of our projects going, oh, that's too hard. I can't touch that. And as soon as you say that, you're dead. You're never going to even try, right? So you got to spend some time and effort into actually learning how to fly through a model, for example. So the first piece of advice is start. The second piece would be echoing what Steve was saying is leveraging those champions. So one thing we've done at PCL is over the last probably kind of about when I started in this role was we identified we needed these technology champions in each of our districts, and so we created this role for that. You might be a smaller contractor that can't take on have a full-time person on that, but assigning someone quarter time or half time and saying, go do research, figure out how we can leverage technology and BIM, and then start to implement it. And as again, echoing Steve, project, we can't see the camera. Project A is down. Project 1 is here. Project 2 is here. And every single day, every single time we start a new project, we're adding to what we did on the previous project. And so starting small with a proof of concept. So we're going to go out to this project. We're going to try something. We don't know if this is going to work. We accept that it may not work on the first go around, and we're going to learn on the next project or the next segment of work within that project. Those would be my 3 kind of key pieces.
Awesome. Thank you. And that's the formal presentation. I'll jump into some questions in that, but I do want to thank you very much for your insights. One of the things that just keeps resonating with me through all of this is just how quickly the construction industry is changing and how technology is changing the landscape of how projects are planned, tracked, and ultimately built. Like, I date back about 20 years in this sector, and it's mind-boggling just to see how technologically advanced some of these systems are and that they're being implemented. And it is a fantastic story, and I appreciate you guys sharing insights that'll help it carry forward. So and now that I've hopefully flattered you enough to take on questions on the fly, so you're forewarned. I'll dive into a couple things here. One of the first ones that came in is just asking, is there a minimum project size where VDC makes sense? And I think that calls to some of our early discussion in this. I don't know who's comfortable with answering this, but I'll pitch to Steve.
Yeah, I love this question. I continually always get this question, even to this day, whether it's a junior member coming up through the ranks or whatever the case is. And the thing, it used to be, I would say 5 to 10 years ago, we might look to assign a dollar value of a project to defining if we're going to implement BIM or VDC processes on it. And while typically the larger the dollar value, the more complex the project is, the more benefit we would gain from these processes, that's not always true. And so I say there is no project size specificity, at least in my mind, because you can have, for example, say $1 million, $2 million renovation in a mall that needs to stay operational versus a $7 million Costco warehouse that is a box. And you have way more complexity of integration and working with systems that are already running and need to stay operational in that $2 million job than you do with that $7 million job or $40 million job. So the biggest thing that defines what makes sense to implement these VDC processes or BIM processes is the scope and the complexity of said scope to define what and where you would implement different processes. That's kind of the stance I've always taken on it, because again, the more the complex the project is, doesn't matter the dollar value at that point. It can be really tiny to, even a house. Sometimes if you're retrofitting your own house, sometimes there's case for BIM and VDC processes where, again, a large, huge warehouse that's a box doesn't necessarily make sense. So.
Cool. Thank you.
Having had to make multiple trips to Home Depot DIYing things, I can definitely echo kicking myself for not having drawn it in 3D first.
Well, map it all out first before the trip, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And double check your list, because there's always one item you're going back for. Now, interesting one here. Are the subtrades coming to GCs with innovative technology that they would like to use on site, or is it the GCs leading this? So I think this is the push or pull. Who's who's leading the charge to digital technology on the job site? And I know it's probably an answer somewhere in the middle, because it's not going to be one side or the other ultimately. But what's your experience? Are you seeing subcontractors coming in saying, we like to use this, and you're able to adapt it into your systems, or is it a lot of showing them the way with the digital systems that you're using? So maybe I'll go to Hamad.
Yeah, I think it's hard to give you one answer. Like you said, it's a little bit of both. So we've had a lot of success kind of showing our community of subcontractor partners and even design partners the tools that we use as an enterprise, and have seen them kind of start to implement those into their own organization. So we've seen that definitely. But sometimes when it comes to the more specialty kind of VDC side of things, we have seen, some of our trade partners recommend different tools and softwares as well. So it's not like it's a one-way street. There's definitely, suggestions that come from there, and sometimes we're able to look at them or implement them as well. So I'd say it's a two-way street.
Excellent. And
Maybe-
go ahead. Yes.
I was going to echo that. I think especially on the VDC side, seeing subtrades really take the lead on the coordination front, because they're getting that direct benefit out of it. I think maybe more on the point solution type of things on the IoT side, that type of thing is generally more, at least in my experience, been more driven from the GC side.
And then a question about the tools that are being used. Do you see more benefit in using enterprise tools or using single point solutions that you're able to bridge together to fit your processes? And what are the challenges that exist with interoperationality? If I got that one out, wow. So go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, so I think this kind of goes to like the same question of what's the cost value to start BIM. There's no one answer for this. I think it's very case by case. You have to understand a few different things. Your client, what they want as their output, what you want internally as your output, what your company has in terms of software. Like we're talking about Autodesk and Bentley being like the two of the biggest design softwares, and there is interoperability, but there's also issues with the interoperability, and we deal with that on a day-to-day basis of building workflows to figure out what works with what. So I think there's number one is the preference of your company, because there's always especially in a design firm, there's always a preference of softwares, or you have your people that are very skilled in certain softwares. And when it comes to staffing, maybe you don't have the ability to choose whoever you want because they might be tied up. So you really have to cater each project to, number one is the client's output deliverable, and then number two is what your company is able to tailor and output as the output of the product. And yeah, there's no one thing. The enterprise solutions help for, like, let's say Autodesk, like you'll have your suites of Revit and Civil 3D and Navisworks and InfoWorks, which all will speak to each other, especially in like an infrastructure project. A lot of the times in buildings, you might just be using Revit and Navisworks and stuff like that. So case by case project, unfortunately, there's no.
I'll maybe just add one point to that, where it's also like for us, for example, we have a mixed bag, because there are times that it does depend on the owner or client and their specific needs and requirements, especially if they're tying it into their facilities management system or whatever. They may have a specific requirement that is not part of our in-house tools that we have to cater to. But then also, like Stephen alluded to, it's really a decision that you need to make internally based upon how your business processes want to look. And that helps form and shape what direction you may go with enterprise solutions versus single point. Or like I said, we have a mixed bag internally here. And what you'll find, I think, while you're doing your research on this, and I'm sure the others on the call can echo this, is there's a lot more programs that are specifically being brought out, or third-party softwares that are creating those data bridges to talk to each other, so that you're not as restricted as you were maybe 5-10 years ago with having to make those hard decisions.
Cool. And we've only got a couple minutes left, so I'm going to end off with one question that brings in a different aspect of this. And I really like it because every time I turn around, I'm seeing numbers are challenging on the labor front. And the one question here says, what do you want students and teachers and schools to know about the innovation occurring in the industry that would appeal to students and interest them in construction? And what are you most excited about and want them to know? Because again, it's the $1 million question. We can talk to ourselves about all of this great stuff. We've got to showcase it out to the world. So what would you like to see students and teachers know about what's happening? So I'll start with Steve. You're up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This one specifically rings true to me because I was actually just at a construction career expo down in our US location, specifically for like high school and first year construction students in post-secondary. And I think the biggest thing that I even myself took away from it was seeing the students' eyes light up going, I never thought about that. So an example is we actually had a virtual reality booth set up walking through one of our live jobs so that they could see some of the things that we would use it for, because they were kind of giving you this funny look that, why are you using virtual reality? You're not fighting anyone. You're not, strafing away to get someone in a game or anything like that. But they didn't think that there was an application outside of gaming, for example, that would be applicable. So it really opened what the comment, a very typical comment we got from that was that there's a lot more avenues now with technology that can service the construction industry than in the past. And there needs to be a little bit more exposure, I think, from us to showcase what the technologies can do to benefit our projects and our project teams that are maybe unconventional to the traditional way that, like, say, VR or drones or what have you have typically been used.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll just tell everybody you play games for a living. Excellent. So I'll just say it looks like we've reached the end of our session today, and I'd like to thank everybody who took time to out of their busy schedules to join us for the webinar. Really appreciate the audience coming in. The questions were fantastic. Thank you. And I'd really like to thank our panelists, Aaron, Stephen, Hamad, and Steve, for their excellent and informative discussion. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, GC Pay and Software One. They've helped make the webinar possible. And just a reminder to everybody, there'll be that brief 3-question customer satisfaction survey. It definitely helps Annex Business Media, the parent company of Onsite Magazine, know how to tailor these presentations to make the most of it for everybody. If you tuned in late to today's session, great news, it's been recorded. Link to the recording will be sent to you within 24 hours. And I honestly hope you took some great information today from this session. I really appreciate the insights of the panelists. It's been fantastic. I know I've learned a few things, and it's going to influence the magazine going forward. So I appreciate that as well. Once again, I'm your host, Adam Friel. I wish everybody a safe and productive day. Do good work out there. Thank you.